There's something about the mind that, like, it needs to complete the process. Everything is a process that unfolds. It has a beginning, a middle, and then a conclusion, right? And there's something about the mind and its need to see out this process. And I don't know what it is, but this is part of life, I guess. And it's part of becoming actualized is completing processes, right? So, like, specifically what I'm talking about is trauma. If a person experiences trauma when they're young or in life at some point, it's almost like the trauma stops the process from unfolding. And the mind gets caught in this loop where it's trying to create, it's trying to it's trying to complete this process, but the trauma has separated the mind from itself. It's segmented it. So the person can't complete the process because they're split. But the mind still tries to complete that process, and that's called it's called a trauma loop. That's what that's called. But anyways, it's an interesting phenomenon. So I had a dysfunctional childhood, and when I turned 2021, I recreated my family with my friends, and we all rented houses together. And my friends had all probably dysfunctional upbringings also, and they were recreating their childhoods with with me, and we were all doing it. We were all caught in this trauma loop where we were trying to go back and fulfill the process of birth to adulthood, where we complete the process of our nuclear family and then move on and start our own nuclear families. Like, that's the natural flow of things. But since we weren't able to complete that nuclear family process as children and then young adults, we were all trying to recreate it together. So in 2012, I was getting to a point where the recreation of my nuclear family, in an unconscious attempt to complete this familial process, was beginning to, like sand in your hands, how it falls through the cracks. It was beginning to, like, my hands were beginning to become empty. Like, I was beginning to see the breakdown of the trauma loop happening within me, and like how this wasn't going to happen. And I just needed to move on and continue on with my life. I was beginning to see this. My recreated family was beginning to break down. I was using drugs and drinking alcohol every day from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed, and I slept on the floor in the living room. Even though I had a room with a bed, I slept on the floor in the living room every day. And about, I don't know, I'd say a month before everything fell apart and the transition period occurred for me moving onward. Um, I was beginning to break down personally. So my recreated family was breaking down. I was breaking down. The drug use and the stress and the delusion that I was chasing, they were all caving in on themselves. And so I took some acid. I took some LSD, and I had this trip, and it was in 2012 in September. And on this trip, you know, I saw it. I saw that I was a drug addict, that I had become a drug addict. I was a loser. I was at the bottom. I saw it. And, you know, it was a pretty profound experience for me. But I think, you know, I maybe made it 2 or 3 days being sober after that experience. And then I just continued on with drinking and using drugs. So I had these friends. I had this couple. It was a guy and a girl, and they were together, and they were my friends, and they were like swingers. They had like they kind of were into the swinging lifestyle, and I would make jokes to myself in my head about how they wanted to swing with me, and like I thought it was funny to myself to joke about that, but anyway, somehow it happened that I was going to go over to their apartment and cook dinner for them because I was pretty much, you know, falling over the edge, and I really wanted to do that. I felt like that was just I needed to do that, you know. So I go over there, and you know, I got these kind of imaginary jokes, you know, that I'm making about them and how they're going to, you know, how they want to fool around with me or whatever. And then I'm there, I'm trying to cook dinner, I'm high, you know, I'm really high. And they hit on me. They don't hit on me, but they invite me into it, that. And for some reason, because at that point, this was just made up in my head, and I was kind of sensing it and just feeling it and just imagining it. But then when they actually invited me, something happened in my head, and it literally broke a hole in my head. It blew my head wide open, and I couldn't handle it, and I couldn't handle anything. I left their house immediately, not because I was like freaked out that they wanted to fool around or whatever, but that like that I had been joking and thinking about that, and then it was actually real. And because I was so fragile and I was going over the edge and I was on so many drugs, and my delusions were crashing down, my whole created family was falling apart and crashing down. Everything was crashing down. And then the only real thing that I saw was that these swinger friends wanted to, you know, mess around with me or whatever. And for some reason, that just blew a hole. There's a barrier in all people. There's a barrier that separates us from like the infinite. Like there's a barrier, and I busted a hole in that barrier. And so I left, and I went to my house, and I was not okay. Things were coming in. Things were coming in, and they weren't supposed to be. And the Mormons are right. I saw the kingdom, but there are breeders and there are non-breeders. And if you're a breeder, your duty as a Mormon is to raise your children in the Mormon church because they're right. And I saw the kingdom. But since I'm not a breeder, non-breeders are geniuses. It doesn't matter. They don't need to do anything because non-breeders don't have children. They don't need to raise them up in the church because they're geniuses, and geniuses don't need to have children. And I saw in my friend group all the other geniuses, but being a genius means you can't tell anybody about it. So that was some of the stuff that came in, and it was crazy. It was crazy stuff. And more stuff came in too. Basically stuff about craving and Buddhism and the ego, but that was some of the other stuff that was coming in. And there was some part of me, my seed of consciousness was strong enough for me to understand that if I went out of me through the hole I put in that barrier and into the infinite, that I would not come back. I would not, the rational part of me would not come back. I knew that. So what I did was, that is what came in. And so I closed it off. I closed it off as hard as I could, pretty much as soon as I could. And I did not go into that. And I wanted to go into it. It's like doing cocaine or smoking crack or something, you know, like it gets into your blood and instantly, boom, there's an urge for more. You need to do more. And the urge to go in was just like that. It was just like that. The urge to, I need to go deeper into this. But I'm so thankful that there was some sense of consciousness in me strong enough to understand that if I did go into that, I would not come back. And so I sealed it off. And I talked to one of my roommates, and I was just talking what had come into me out of my mouth. And he was like, dude, you do not sound very good. And I was like, I know. I just went crazy. I just went crazy. And it took a few days, and I calmed down, and I kind of got back to baseline level, whatever that was for me at the time. But you know, that was basically in 2012, that was my psychosis experience. And then me coming out of it and, you know, shutting that off. And there's been a few other times, you know, people give that certain names. You know, I've heard it called Kundalini awakening. I've heard that's what it's called. But basically when you rupture that barrier, you know, the whole idea is to access the infinite through like meditation and yoga. No, that's what the whole point of those exercises and practices is to access it, but you access it from a safe space. When you rupture the barrier unintentionally, it's really dangerous. And so so that was 2012. I sealed it off. I ended up going back to, you know, my life and starting over and moving on. Right. So, but, you know, I went to a psychic a few years later. You know, I went to a psychic, and seeing the psychic reopened my psychic wound. That's a psychic wound, you know, and I wasn't ready for that. And so, you know, it reopened my psychic wound. I walk somehow, you know, I'm in the movie theater and people's names are EIEIO, and you know, there's like, you have to choose your seats, and it's like I'm in a spaceship and I'm out of my mind. You know what I'm saying? So, but you know, these types of experiences are inherent for, what do they call them? The indigo people, the sensitive people, the psychic people, the, you know, the higher frequency people, right? These types of experiences are part of their path. They're part of their journey, you know, because, you know, dealing with the infinite and being close to the realm of the infinite realm, you know, you have to have experiences around the infinite realm, the psychic realm, whatever. So, hey, if you're a sensitive, intuitive, what do they call them? Empath? I don't know what they call them. But, you know, be prepared. Be ready. Be ready. Because let me tell you what, woo, and know that there is a point of no return. There is a point of no return. Know that and respect that point of no return. Cool. All right. Well, I wanted to share that with everybody out there. So hopefully there will be some value and some use for it for somebody.